Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Schefter, Principal of Schefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.schefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Schefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's special guest is Ann Lawyer with Dynamic Education Services. Now, Ann has a bunch of different titles. First of all, she's a special education certified. She's a certified academic language therapist and a structured literacy dyslexia specialist. That's something we haven't heard before, Ann. So explain, what is that structured literacy dyslexia specialist?
So there are a couple of national licenses, and the Certified Academic Language Therapy is put out by ALTA, and the Structured Literacy certification is put out by IDA. So, and there's only about 5,000 people in the nation that have those certifications. So it takes a lot of work. So.
Wow. So the first thing is, when you're looking for a tutor, what do you need to look for? Obviously, certification.
Yeah, so you definitely want someone who is certified and has to sit for this test. We had to have 750 hours of teaching Orton-Gillingham methods. I'm trained in Take Flight out of Scottish Rite Hospital, but there are other programs, MC, and there are some other ones. But you want to make sure when you're working with those severely dyslexic students that they have that really specialized training that's explicit and systematic.
Right. And I think, I don't remember if it was the last show or the show before, we had a reading specialist on, and she was saying how she had her master's in readings, but she never learned any special education techniques.
Well, and I'm a special ed teacher, and I'm really old, and I actually didn't learn any of those either. I had a couple of reading classes, but it never touched on phonemic awareness and some of these really important pillars in the science of reading. And so I went in and I love reading, and I thought I was doing a great job, and I didn't know anything. And I feel bad for those kids I missed, but I know better, so I do better now. So
we did what we could with what we knew.
Yeah, at that time.
Yeah. I look back when I was teaching eons ago, and it's the same thing. I was like, oh, wow, I probably shouldn't have done that. And I could have done this,
Yep.
But so you mentioned the science of reading. So what is the science of reading?
So the science of reading has 5 really big pillars, and there's been a lot of controversy over the last couple of years about this. And science of reading is not new. It's a very well researched material. The National Reading Panel came out with Information Clear in 2000. And I remember doing a talk for someone else, and that was a comment I got back that, well, that's really old research. But that research hasn't changed. And so those 5 big pillars are the phonics, the phonemic awareness, the fluency, the vocabulary, and reading comprehension. When you put all those things together, then you get actually almost like a 6th pillar, which is writing. And that's really important for the students that I work with. And the phonics and the phonemic awareness, I think, has been the area that's been the most controversial in the last few years. So.
Yeah, and it's funny because I remember, like, when I taught, it was whole language and everything was, you do it around the book and all that, and you didn't teach phonics necessarily. But, one of the things I've noticed in education, and I'm sure you've noticed also, is like the pendulum swings. Oh, we're going to do it this way, and oh, we're going to do it that way. And the reality is, you don't need to pick one way. No. Every child learns differently, right?
Yes, but we still have to have that really good foundation. When I work with parents and talk with them, it's really important when I do my assessments. Can I give you an example real quick?
Of course, yeah.
So I have a writing assessment I did a couple weeks ago, and they insisted that this student, he's a 7th grader, could read. And I kept asking, are you sure he can read? Because when I asked him to write, when I asked him to respond to me, it was just obvious that something was going on. So if I did not have the training that I did, when I did his his level of reading. The benchmark is 136 words a minute for 7th graders. He hit that, no problem. However, when I asked what he had read, when I asked the vocabulary, when I asked the inference questions, it there was almost no score. So he came to me for a writing assessment, but had I not looked deeper, I wouldn't have been able to pinpoint that problem, and I would have been addressing the wrong issues when I worked with him. And that's really
And
important.
yeah, it is. And I love that you said that, because that's one of the things that I have the issue with the school assessments when they do, because they test fluency, they
Yes.
test vocabulary, they test phonics,
Yes.
and they test comprehension. They don't test all of them together.
Right.
And our kids with dyslexia, what I've found and I've seen is they can do each individual thing, but now push them all together and it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And also, when you look at those IQ scores and you see, like, my granddaughter has a 48-point split, and that is extreme. And the kids I'm working with now really have those extreme splits. And I feel bad because when they would use what is called that general IQ, they wouldn't qualify for services, but you saw these huge gaps. And so I feel bad. I know now how to address it, but when I first started, they didn't qualify for services, and those kids didn't get the intervention that they needed.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's why it's important, if you hire an advocate or an attorney, somebody to go with you, is to make sure that they understand the numbers and they understand how to make the arguments to get your child to qualify.
Yeah, and I really talk with my parents about that, is it's not just the flat numbers. You have to look kind of what's behind them and really educating them on what those numbers mean.
Right. And then it's also the subscores.
Yes,
I've had that happen also. I had a client that they were like, not eligible, not eligible, not eligible. And then the psychologist said, well, subscores of 6 is 2 standard deviations below, and we use the 1.5 standard deviation. And I'm like, so if there's any subtests with the score of 6, they'd be eligible. And she's like, yes. I'm like, okay, spelling. And then I don't remember the others, but there were like 3, and I named the 3, and she goes, she's eligible.
Yeah.
And the rest of the team was like, you can't argue the numbers, if you know the numbers.
Yeah. And you have to really, when you're talking about those subtests, that one of those I was thinking of was a C-top. So overall, a student might appear okay, but when they've got those gaps in those subscores, or even in the IQ test, if their working memory is very, very low, or their processing speed, that is definitely going to affect how they learn to read. And we need to have more education on what those numbers look like.
Agree. And then the other thing that I've seen they use a lot, which not everybody knows to use, is that instead of the full scale IQ, they use the GAI, the General Academic Index, because that leaves off some stuff and you get a clearer picture of where the IQ is, because of when you have those gaps. So I think it leaves off working memory and processing for the GAI, right?
But for the kids that I work with, those are exactly where they're having the biggest difficulty. And when we do intervention with them and it may not be working, we need those subscores to help us.
Right. Yeah, because then it helps you to pinpoint exactly what's going on with the child, whether, as you said,
and where we need to spend more time.
Right. And because, I see it a lot with our kids with dyslexia, especially like I've seen it not come out until like 3rd grade, or even as late as 6th, 7th grade, because the kids are usually bright and they compensate. They know how to mask it. They know how to use the context cues, use what's going on in the classroom, use everything else to make it seem like they're exactly where they're supposed to be, when in reality they're struggling.
Yeah, and my caseload has totally flipped from boys to girls, and I have mostly middle school girls, and unfortunately some of them have, confidence issue, even self-harm issues, because they're these beautifully behaved, bright young women, and their file cabinet got full, and because they didn't have, when they go to pull that information, it's either misfiled or not there, then they're finally falling apart. And especially not because of COVID, because this problem has existed before then, but those students that are that age, because they missed that 1st and 2nd grade instruction, wow, we are really seeing some gaps because of that.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that. And I've had clients or potential clients, I should say, come in for a strategy session and like, sixth, seventh grader, eighth grader, just diagnosed with dyslexia. And I tell them flat out, like, look, as an attorney, I can 100% get in there and get you a perfect IEP. The problem is it's not going to be what your child needs because the
Yeah,
middle school doesn't have the capability of
yeah,
doing the phonics and teaching in the way a
yeah.
dyslexic child needs to do. And I say, save your money on me, take the money, go hire a tutor that knows how to teach dyslexia. Do that, and your child will flourish like crazy.
Yeah, and especially my students, I have 2 ninth graders right now that are extremely brilliant, and they both were just diagnosed within the last year, and that was a decision they had to make, and it breaks my heart. So, but sometimes I've got one student that is really, really super low and is trucking along, but some of my girls, when I get in there and use like rewards or do some really explicit instruction on morphology, prefixes and suffixes, I have one girl that made a year of progress in 6 weeks, and I
Wow.
worked with another one 3 or 4 months, and she actually made 4 years of growth, and that
Wow.
and that happens a lot, and I always am in awe of it that I don't know what I'm doing, but it happens a lot, and their confidence and those kids, when they come to you, they're so shut down and they don't wanna work with you, and when you see in just a month, they're like, "Oh, well, I didn't realize I needed to do that for spelling or that I don't have to memorize all of that," or it's just so much relief for them, and it has been so exciting to see. I have such a neat bunch of students right now. I really like it.
That's gotta be amazing, I can
Mhm.
imagine, because it's like the light bulb goes off. Okay, I
Oh,
used to
yeah,
say, right, when I
yeah,
taught, everybody's like, 1st grade, well, way back when 1st grade was when you're expected to read, not
yeah,
kindergarten,
yeah.
but, like, in 1st grade, that, like, the kids aren't reading, and it'd be like, "Don't worry, they'll catch up, don't worry, they'll catch
Mhm.
up," and then all of a sudden the light bulb goes off,
Yeah,
and they'd shut up. They'd shoot up their
yeah.
scores and their capabilities, but that was the teacher mentality of, "Wait, they'll catch up." As
Mhm.
a lawyer and an
Yeah,
advocate, absolutely not.
yeah,
Never wait and see. Get your child evaluated. Push the school to evaluate if you think
yeah.
something's going on, because with dyslexia, if you catch it earlier,
Mhm.
it's better because you get it in place, and then you don't have this as many self-esteem issues
Yes.
because they don't
I've
grow up with
Yeah.
yeah.
I've got a couple of younger students, and I am so grateful their parents got help. I have a 2nd grader, and she's been a little bit resistant, but then she's like, "I went to school and I read Red Cat, Blue Cat, and I did it better than my friend did it." And finally, I've got buy-in. She finally realizes why we're doing, because it's so hard after school all day to sit down and,
Yeah,
so I have to be really dynamic. I use puppets. I have special pencils that I use. I have a lot of different things. I use AI and they create their own pictures, and we do a lot of really fun stuff to keep it going. So, because it is hard.
yeah, it is. I mean, like, when you're and then you feel like you're being punished. I mean, that's the other
Yeah,
thing I hate about special ed
yeah,
is, like, that you have to do more because
yeah,
of your disability,
yep,
and then so it's like you feel like,
yeah,
"Well, I'm stupid," or you know what I mean? It's that
yeah.
mentality of where it's, no, your brain works differently.
Yeah. And with my older students, I try really hard to teach them strategies and have them create notebooks so that when I'm not with them, we create a spelling notebook, we create a morphology notebook, we work on close reading. I do something on sketchnoting, which is really fun because I want to work myself out of a job. So,
Right.
but I want them to have, we know dyslexic students need a lot of practice and sometimes they forget. So if they have kind of those reference books, they can go back and kind of review it and still maintain those skills.
That's awesome. Yeah, I say that all the time. I wish I didn't have a job. It would mean the school systems are doing what they're supposed to be
Yes,
doing, and all the students are getting what they need. But the
yes,
reality is it's not gonna happen.
yeah,
So here we come, and that's part of the show is also like educating the families of what's out
yeah,
there, what you need to know, because I've heard so many stories of like, well, they've been with a reading tutor for 6 months and it hasn't helped at
mhm,
all. I'm like, well, you might not have the right match. Not saying that reading tutor is not good, but it might not be the right match for your child. And
yeah,
if you that tutor might not have the right training to know how to teach your child.
yeah. Well, and that goes into those interventions. And when I'm progress monitoring, if in 6 weeks I'm not seeing growth. Now, I have had to really adjust that this year. I have some students with selective mutism, some really, really severe students. I have a student that did not even know the word the, and she's reading
Wow.
short vowel sentences, which is amazing. So, but you have, because of experience, if they're not making progress, we want to look at, is their group small enough? Well, with me, it always is because it's one-on-one. Okay. Is it intense enough? Are they getting enough, practice? For me, I usually only see my kids once or twice a week, but I provide seesaw and have activities up there so that they can work on those during the week. We also want to look at, is it the right intervention? Because we have a lot of great programs. I'm using UFly right now, which has been absolutely amazing. And I'm so excited teachers are being able to use it, because even if you're not OG trained, it is direct and explicit. And I've seen incredible results. I've used it for about 2 years, and I'm using it all the way up to freshman or to 9th grade. And it's only a K2 program, and I'm having amazing success with it. But it's going to get into a lot more teachers' hands, which I'm super excited about. So maybe we won't have so many referrals.
Right.
That's my hope.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I know, at least in Montgomery County, I know I've seen a lot of reading interventions and so forth. Unfortunately, not all of the reading teachers are trained. I've had people on, reading specialists on that they were reading specialists. They had no special ed training. They didn't know Wilson. They didn't know OG. They didn't know any of that. And once they got in there and realized, like, I can't teach these kids with dyslexia, they went on their own and outside of got the certifications.
Yeah, and it's expensive. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of the colleges still, some are getting better, but a lot of them do not teach. Or the dyslexic certificates they offer, you only have to have like 25 hours. And
Yeah.
that's just not enough. I mean, even with what I have, I'm still improving, and I've done this for over 10 years. So, and I'm
Wow.
still finding new ways to be able to work with them and get better at what I do.
That's
So,
great. I want to say I was at an expo, the Community Caring's Disability Expo, and I want to say that Towson, I'll call it Towson State University and date myself because that's when I went to it. It's now Towson University, but I believe they have a dyslexia like certification now.
mhm.
I don't know how good it is or not, but it makes me happy because when I went to Towson, they didn't have a special ed.
Yeah.
So I did early childhood, and then I had to go back and do my master's when I was in Florida for the special ed. But like, it makes me happy to see, because Towson was originally known as a teaching college.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So some of the teaching colleges are embracing science of reading, and some are just not yet. So
Yeah. But that's with everything, which is
Yeah.
just so frustrating because,
yeah.
we think we're all getting the same education for what we're paying for in
Yeah.
college, but
Yeah.
you're not.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
really frustrating.
Yeah. So I want to go back to, you brought up earlier, and just for those that might not know, what is phonemic awareness?
Okay. So there's 2 terms with that. So we've got phonological awareness. So if we think of that as the umbrella, so when we think about if we break that word down, ology means study of, and phone means sounds. So it's the study of words is the overall arching. So those are things like syllables, rhyming. We used to think that kids absolutely had to have rhyming, and some of the newer research is showing we can skip past that. I've got some dyslexic students that still can't rhyme, but we need to move on and help them with some of the other things. Then as we drop down, we have phonemic awareness. So that EME, when we look at morphology, is the smallest part, and phone, once again, is sound. So that is more manipulating those individual sounds. So let's play a game for just a second. So say the word
Okay.
cat.
Cat.
Okay, now change k to b.
Bat.
Okay, so we could do initial sound. We could do say bat again.
Bat.
Now change a to I.
Bit.
Okay, so we
I had
could
to
do
pause
middle
and think.
sounds. Yeah, so we could do middle sounds, and then we can also do ending sounds. So say bit.
Bit.
Now change the t to n.
Bin.
Yeah, and we can also slide in there's more complicated type things when we're moving the second sound or the last sound or some of the different things like that. So it is really important that we're able to change those sounds up in 2 seconds. And the reason for that is if our teacher's going along and they're down here and we're still decoding up here, those students every time are missing that middle part of the information. And it doesn't take very long. You know, at the end of the week, you've missed a lot of information. So phonemic awareness is really important.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I know I've mentioned before, we used to play games of the animal games. My mom used to when we would be on road trips of like,
Yeah.
you would say a word and an animal name, and the next person had to do an animal name that was of the last letter. So like if I said tiger,
Cool. Yeah.
you would have to say,
yep,
you know, an animal that starts with R and then go.
Yeah.
And I do that, of course, now with my kids because it's just family traditions.
But those traditions are great because those are creating those awareness of how words and sounds go together. So those are perfect.
Right. Yeah. So they're fun games. That's like a lot of fun games out there that you don't realize. And I remember also what I love doing with my kids is the rhyming, which I know you say you don't need to, but like we'll start with bat and we'll go bat, cat, dat, and go through the whole alphabet and just giggle and laugh because gat isn't a word, but it's funny, and like, and things like that.
And I'm knowing, is it a real word or is it a nonsense word? Those are important too, because when we do multisyllabic words, most of those syllables are nonsense words. So that's perfect.
Right. Yeah. So it makes sense. So with phonemic awareness, like they don't, at least I've seen now, they're not really teaching that in school anymore. Have you seen that they are or they aren't?
In the last couple of years, there has been a push for phonemic awareness.
So it's gone back to it.
Yeah, there are some programs that teach it. There is some controversy over doing phonemic awareness without letters and with letters. So there's some research coming out about that. And so I'm not sure where that's going to end up. But
how do you do phonemic awareness without letters?
So phonemic awareness in some of the tightest terms is considered sounds only, where you could do it in the dark. Just like the game that we played, we didn't need letters. Okay. However, when you think about how the brain works, we have for reading, we have those sounds and they have to connect to those symbols in order to create that visual camera in the back of our head. For UFly, they use the examples of just what we did, and then they add the letters in another part. For me, adding the letters in has been more effective with most of my students. So I don't know. So there is a lot of research coming out about that and a lot of papers coming out about that right now. So
interesting.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah. So it's, seeing all the research. And of course, like you could find research saying one thing and then there's always research saying the total opposite.
Yeah.
And
you're true. Yeah.
Right. What I've learned is that because all of our brains work differently. And so guess what? This might work for me and not that. Yes. And that might work for my sister and not this, like even from the same family, just our brains learn differently. But
we still want to put down that same really good foundation for all our students. So we might have a student that needs more help in spelling or needs more help in segmenting or blending words, but we want to make sure that they all have that really good foundation. We want to make sure they don't have those gaps.
Right, which makes sense. And that's where like our older children that get diagnosed a lot older realize that that's where you have to go get an academic language coach or, therapist, or they keep changing all the names on what the tutors, what they call them. It's so important because if you don't have that foundation, it doesn't matter whatever you're doing, you're never going to do anything else.
Yeah.
And you're always going to struggle. And if you're constantly struggling to just read, your comprehension is dropping, your inferences, your ability to write about it, everything falls behind as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So when you work with kids, you do an initial assessment? How does it work?
It depends. A lot of times I will do an assessment and then work from there. Sometimes I have enough information from their IEP, and I usually, no matter where or what I have on the student, I will do an initial phonics. I use the QPS, and sometimes I'll go ahead and do a fluency. I've had kids that are so low that it just was so stressful for them to do. I knew pretty much what we needed, where we needed to start. I just use it as like a temperature gauge of where I need to start with them. And then I progress monitor from there. Yeah. So assessment is really important, but sometimes I have the pieces that I need to start. So,
Right. Because if they've done recent assessments and things like that, and if an IEP is written well and has the present levels the way it should be,
yeah.
You can go from there.
Yeah. Well, even if they're not written like they should be, at least I kind of know where to start. And I kind of know how to advise the parents that this is not good IEP goals. So,
right. Yeah. And then they can go back and fight that, hopefully on their own. And then, so like for parents that are looking and, you know, they're like, I have a tutor. How do they know, like, is it working? What's the, like, what should a good language therapist or tutor, however you want to call it, be telling parents so that the parents understand that it is working or isn't working?
well, I teach all online. And so when I've been teaching online since about 2018 or 19. I worked for a literacy center for a long time, and we expanded into that. So when COVID happened, we
We're ahead of
actually,
the game.
yeah, we were ahead of the game. And actually, it was funny because when grants came out for COVID, we could not get any of them because our kids just kept going, and we didn't have, we didn't have learning loss. So at first, I was kind of apprehensive when parents sat with me that they were watching me. But like next week, I have a parent we've invited to the session so that they can see what we're doing. So I don't like the term tutor because I have so much more experience in that. So that's also kind of important to look at. But we want to look at, obviously the interaction with your child. How are they giving you progress? So usually about every 6 to 8 weeks, I either talk with my parents, I send notes, I email them. I always let them know kind of what lesson and what concept that we're working on and what I'd like them to work on. And that helps us keep going. And, sometimes when you go from short vowels to long vowels, there can be that magic-y can be kind of tricky. So I'll kind of give parents heads up, hey, we're getting ready to go into this. You might see kind of a plateau for a little bit or some struggle, and it's okay. We're getting through it. And they're always welcome to come watch. So
that makes sense. Yeah. And if you have somebody that's not willing to let a parent watch, that's a red flag to me.
Yeah.
I get it as a former teacher. Like, I don't want the parents looking, like you get nervous and stuff. But if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and it's working, then there shouldn't be a reason to not.
And it's so funny. I have so many parents in the background that all of a sudden will come and say, what did you just say that rule is? Because we know for dyslexia, spelling is that really big red flag. And so I've really been talking to my parents a lot more. And I've actually developed a product that I'm just getting ready to release this week on spelling for parents. It's a guide. And then I've created a really extensive 45-page guide. And I created the first tool with CK and CK, but it is in parent language. So it's not in teacher language. I rewrote it so it was all accessible to the parents because, like you said, a lot of those parents had whole language. So as things are changing and we're using sound boxes and we're using phonemic awareness, parents don't know what that means. And they want to have their kids be successful and they want to be part of that team. So we have to help them with that.
Right. Which it totally makes sense. Because if the parents don't have the right language, how can they support? Or if the parents don't know the rules, because as you said, you learn.
Yeah, because I had a mom come home and show me the sound boxes, and she's like, I have no idea what to do with this. So I explained to her about sound boxes and how it works and everything. And she was really excited, and now they're practicing every day. But we just needed to have that conversation of, what does this mean? And why are we not memorizing spelling words anymore? So that's pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. I think back to when I'm trying to remember. I want to say it was my undergrad, but it might have been my master's. But I remember in a reading class, learning the drill and skill, like to
Mhm.
teach. And
Mhm.
I was like, why didn't I learn this stuff when I was
I
a
know.
kid? Like,
Yeah.
I would have probably been able to spell,
Yeah. Yep.
like these rules are amazing, but
Yeah.
I wasn't taught those rules because that's not how
Yep.
they did it when I was growing up.
Me either. And so there was a
So,
lot of that I learned too. But, when we talk about spelling it not being predictable, actually it is predictable with 85%. And if I get my kids to 85%, we can teach them the rest of it. So, yeah.
right, which makes sense. Yeah, I mean, the rules, yeah, I mean, everybody complains, though, English doesn't follow all the rules. Well, we do for the most part,
Yeah.
you
But we have
know?
to know what those rules are. So,
Right, exactly. You need to be taught the rules. So I'm just thinking, like, so for parents that think something's going on, like they're like, huh, this makes sense. Maybe my child is struggling. Maybe there is some dyslexia. What do you recommend? Like, do you recommend asking the school to evaluate or coming to you or
well, we always want, because it's expensive usually when they work with a therapist, um it's okay to ask the school for numbers even if they're not considered on those sit teams or academic teams, when they're saying wait, for the parents to know, okay, what are my numbers now in 6 weeks, what are my numbers, because those are numbers that teachers should be doing anyhow. And if there's an issue, um really start pushing for, please don't wait. We know that if third graders do not make benchmark, 75% of the time, they will never reach benchmark without really intensive intervention. We know now there's very heavy signs of preschoolers having dyslexia. So it's not a secret and it's not something, that we can wait to do. A lot of consultants or certified academic language therapists have free consultations for 20 to 30 minutes where you could talk with them and kind of decide if you want an assessment. I'm working with a company in Canada and their rules are very, very different. And so the parents have decided just having that information so that they know, do I need a academic language therapist? Can I go to the school? Just to give them more information is really is helpful for the parents. So,
yeah. No, that's why I offer one of the things I offer is a strategy session. Like we don't do consultations. We do what I
yeah,
call strategy
yeah,
sessions, which are paid right now with me. But that we talk through the issues. And like I said, like I had a client one time, it was a seventh grader, a potential client. And I'm like, look, I could get you the IEP, but honestly, go
mhm,
get the tutor. And that's what the strategy sessions are for. It's
yeah,
not just me selling my services. It's what's the problem.
yeah,
Let's find the solution to the problem, whether
yeah,
it includes myself, my team or not. This is the solution for your child because we're very focused on the child. To me,
yeah,
I'm a former teacher. It's all about the child.
yeah. And if we're not the right match, then there's very, very few times that I've not been a match, but I have a few kids that online has been really difficult. And so, I let them know, but it's usually with my really, really little ones.
Yeah.
Other than that, online has been super, super effective. So they're very focused. They understand about being online. I use Zoom. I use Seesaw. We share the screen. I have Seesaw is amazing because they get to show what they know. They get to make their pictures. So they have a little digital portfolio. It's really great because you can have them read at the beginning and then as they go through, and it's all dated. So in 6 months, when I get discouraged that they're not making progress and I go back and look at where they are, it is amazing, and parents have access to that, so that really helps them understand where they're making progress too, which is really exciting.
That is. And that's what it's all about, is to see the
Mhm.
progress and see the
Yeah.
connections. Because it's, to me, like reading is such a critical life skill, such a basic skill. Like
Mhm.
until you get reading down, like your education kind of almost comes to a halt
Mhm.
because you really can't do much else, like science isn't going to make sense, biology, social studies, history, like you don't have the reading down. It just kind of, who's going to want to learn anymore because I can't read.
Well, and how many of us have had kids that go to the bathroom, go to the nurse, break their
Yeah.
pencil because that's how they know to cope. So I have a lot of kids that are really amped up and really have a lot of compensatory behaviors when they start. And a lot of them really settle down once they learn to read because their brain's engaged. They know what they're doing with that really explicit systematic instruction. They know what's coming next. In fact, they want to teach me, oh, I'm going to teach visual drill today, or I'm going to teach auditory drill, and I think giving them that time to be a teacher is really powerful, because then they just have that confidence in what they know. So that's been a really good strategy for me.
Yeah, no, that's it. I definitely see how important that is. And I say it all the time that, behavior, children that be, students that have misbehavior in school, there's usually two reasons. One, they're so far behind, they're trying to hide it. They don't want anybody to know. Or two, they're so far ahead, they're bored out of their minds and they're trying to find something to give them some excitement.
I have both sometimes, because
right?
I know more about howitzers and tanks and Russia and the Titanic than I thought I would ever know, but my student couldn't spell a word. So I have absolutely brilliant students. I had one that could write binary code at age 8. I have no idea how to read it. He wrote me 100 lines of binary code and read it all to me, but I gave him a pencil and he hid under the desk. So, and he's a grown up now, but he would bring in tinfoil with these incredible things he could do with them. And he was brilliant. But you put that pencil in his hand and it was all over.
And then you come in and teach him how to do it. And now everything's together. This has been so awesome. So if people wanted, so you said you do virtual. So is the certification like state, or is it nationwide?
Yeah. So the CALT and the structured literacy is national. And then I have, I'm certified in Kansas and Missouri. So as a teacher also. So
got it, as a teacher. So it doesn't matter where you're based, you can reach everybody and hit everybody.
I actually, until just recently, had a student in St. Thomas. So I had students from St. Thomas all the way to Washington. So
that was so cool. So if people want to get in touch with you, if they're like, this might be the right person, I want to check things out, how should they get in touch with you?
So I've rebranded, and so I'm actually HandinHand Reading now. And so they can reach me on Facebook or Instagram. And I had a button that did not turn on this morning to offer the freebie for the sound guide. They just turned it on like 2 minutes before we got on. So I will be putting that up so that they can look at that and get more information.
Got it. Yeah. And when we do the show notes, so like this one's going live, but when we do the actual show notes and stuff, all your links will be below so that people will be able to reach out to you. But this has been so awesome and so informative. Thank you so
excited
much.
I got to come talk to you. So
yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you.
You've been listening to Stress-Free IEP with your host, Frances Schefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through schefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.